Welcome to our little presentation. I'm here with Dylan, Josh, Adrian and Matt, and together we're going to talk about an experience that we had in our postgraduate coursework, doing a collaborative self-study as a way of learning about researching higher education. So I'll just get everyone to introduce themselves. My name's Nikki. I have been the topic coordinator for this topic, working together with Josh. That's your throw, Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. It's been great to contribute to teaching and learning in this topic as a tutor and supporting Nikki.
Dylan?
Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm a research scientist and tutor at Griffith University.
My name is Matt. I'm a tutor with University of Adelaide in health sciences.
And I'm Adrian, also at University of Adelaide. Sorry you can't see me folks due to technical difficulties. I teach near Matthew, although somehow I've never actually met him in real life.
Wonderful.
Awesome. So the topic that we've been involved in is called Researching Higher Education from a Global Perspective, and it's part of the grad cert and the core masters topics in the Masters of Education Specialisation Higher Education run at Flinders University. What we did was we agreed as a class that we would actually do something slightly different with this topic, and instead of doing a normal sort of proposal for a research project and learning about researching higher education that way, we thought, well, let's just be in it. So we went for a more experiential approach. And the reason why I asked the class whether they'd be prepared to do that is because the aims of the topic are intended to be an introduction for the development of students' capacity to engage in further research into higher education, beginning with careful attention to one's own experiences in higher education. So I thought, well, how can we have that experience of researching in higher education? So the crux of it is the collaborative self-study is kind of like being in the research rather than researching on something as if you were separate from it. So a collaborative self-study does look at your own practice and your own experiences in being, in this case, teaching in higher education, but it also looks at the gaps between your practice and what you're actually doing in the real world and the ways that it can be thought about. So in that gap somewhere is something to be learned, let's say, or something that shifts you or something that you can kind of engage with that takes you into a bigger or a more thoughtful space around your practice. And so that's one way of kind of, if you like, being in the research. But we didn't do a lot of work on sort of diving into collaborative self-study itself. We kind of, in the spirit of the methodology, we really jumped in with 2 feet and experienced what this methodology was about by being in it. It was very difficult to get our head around before actually trying it. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a leap of faith, but I think we did okay. So the way that we looked at it was we agreed what the methodology would be. We agreed on the protocol, and we spent a fair bit of time actually doing that. And if I just share my screen, I can just quickly show you the process that we went through, which is this. We spent some time at the beginning of the topic agreeing how we were going to actually do it. And what I had proposed that we agreed to was a protocol, you can see in the yellow bubble there, of a cycle. And we went through only one of these cycles of personal reflective practice, so observing ourselves in practice, and then talking to each other, and that's the collaborative bit. So we talked to each other intensively in dialogue about what we were observing, and then with pushing each other and kind of reflecting on each other's experience, that helped everyone to sort of expand their own a little bit and also help them to reflect back on their own experiences And then there was a process of naming, if you like, what a progressive kind of adjustment might be based on the insights from that. So we only went through that cycle once. It was a taster, if you like. The other thing that we agreed at the beginning was about the research question. So what I might do is just throw to someone who would like to talk about the research question. We agreed that we're going to have an overarching question and then each find our way within that. Does anyone want to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, sure. So I guess for our research question, we went back and forth a little bit and ended up deciding on looking into how do we know what to do? So this is more of a directed kind of self-study approach to looking into why it is that we feel that we know what to do. So this isn't necessarily knowing, it's more of a how do we believe we know what to do in a given situation. Should we go into each research question now, the tailored ones? So we had some, we had some tailored research questions per student, which were designed around something that directly relates to our own practice. For me, I looked into how do I know what to do when orienting students to assessment?
Yeah.
In my case, it was how do I know what to do in adapting assessments for my students?
And my question was very topical. How do I know how to teach students when I can't see them?
And I chipped in one as well as a co-learner. My personalised question was around how do I know how to respond to peer and student feedback about my teaching practice.
Yeah, I really like the way that you jumped in, Josh. That was really in the spirit of the methodology to kind of just communicate your own practice and throw that in, because it just goes to show, doesn't it, that it's a continuous process, and that we're always, and once you begin to notice your own practice and notice your own experiences, I guess that's the beginning of a scholarly approach to being in higher education that continues. So
I found it interesting.
Sorry?
I just quickly, you made a point early on, Nikki, around allowing the personalised questions to evolve and twist and turn as we went along as well.
Yes.
So I found that really helpful guidance from you, which freed us up, not to lock in a question and stick to it necessarily.
The initial question is really just a starting point, isn't it? And then I guess once you're in the research, you begin, new questions arise, or you begin to reframe the way that you thought about the question in the first place.
That was new for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm very interested in the actual your experiences of doing it. And I think what's interesting about this is we don't normally hear about the process of research so much. In collaborative self-study, we do. It's very much about the process, because it's the process that gives us the insights or the outcomes, the outputs, if you like. So I thought we might just spend a bit of time actually looking at what the experience of that was like and what you think the benefits of that are for your own practice in an ongoing way, researching higher education. Who wants to kick off on that? Adrian?
Yeah. Adrian. Yeah, go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess the first thing that really struck me is just that, so my experience in teaching, which I think most educators will probably sympathize with, is that during teaching weeks, you spend every waking hour either preparing to teach, teaching, marking, or addressing student queries. And so for me, it's like, I think I'm naturally a fairly reflective person, and yet I don't get a lot of time to reflect on teaching, either in the sense of my own teaching or even just in the sense of pedagogy in general. You know, what is the best way to teach things? It's just hard to find that time during teaching semesters. And I often think, okay, well, surely I can do that at the end of teaching semester. But that doesn't seem to work either, because when teaching weeks finish, I'm normally behind on a whole bunch of real life things, and I need to, you know, catch up with people and catch up on home maintenance and whatever. So I guess for me, I can see that there's a lot of value in really reflecting on both my own teaching practice and on the theory of teaching in general, but I kind of need to be forced to do that. So for me, any kind of framework that provides that is really beneficial. And yeah, this is one way of doing it. The process that we went through did play the role of forcing me to really consider what I was doing and why I was doing it.
Adrian, do you think there was a benefit in doing it as a group?
Yes. Yeah, well, I'll talk shortly, I guess, about comparing this to another kind of teaching reflective practice that I've done, which is peer observation. And yeah, I guess the biggest difference with this process is that it's been a group process, so we can each learn from each other and get feedback from each other.
Yeah, well said. That's interesting. Thanks. And Dylan, how did you go with it? What was your experience of doing it?
Well, my personal question, how to adapt assessments for my students, I suppose it originally came about in light of the impact of COVID-19, which forced assessments to change due to the restrictions placed on universities. However, my question quickly went beyond adapting assessments due to the pandemic and looked rather into the changing nature of assessments and academic standards across time. My personal approach included documenting my thoughts and feelings, but also trying to write reflective blogs just when time allowed. I found it was important not to jump ahead to the literature right away for confirmation and validation, but rather let myself sort of ponder these phenomena as deeply and clearly as I could articulate. And I found this particularly challenging as my previous research usually starts with the literature. I found the collaborative aspect extremely helpful, the opportunity to listen to Matt, Adrian, and Josh describe their personal experiences with the self-study process, which included the insights, the revelations, but also the struggles and the initial sort of bewilderment in adjusting to the process. It definitely taught me that my inherent assumptions, beliefs, and biases, both consciously and unconsciously, impact my teaching practice. But yeah, ultimately, I suppose, by treating teaching as a subject of inquiry while reflecting upon my own personal assumptions, the self-study process has given me new perspectives for teaching, which I'll take with me going into the future.
Awesome. Thanks. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, so for my topic, going into kind of how do I know what to do when orienting students to assessment, I kind of was looking into this because I'm teaching into what is essentially a first year space and in a fairly diverse cohort. And in order to kind of ensure we can improve outcomes and promote equity and students' accessibility to university in general and the higher education sector as a whole, I wanted to look into ways in which I introduce students to their assessment topics and then guide them through the process and the various hurdles that can come up there. It's been really useful for me. I found that there are a lot of assumptions that we make, whether it's things that we have forgotten we had to learn, or assumptions about our own background and the background of students coming into courses that need to be looked at and critically assessed in order to kind of promote a more equitable kind of environment and promote the ability for first years to kind of orient themselves, not just to a piece of assessment, which was my original kind of topic, but assessment in general, and then that critical part of assessment and feedback as part of the cycle for students during their first and then later years at university.
Yeah, good insights. Adrian, did you want to mention something else, comparing it to a different methodology?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so the other kind of, I guess, community of practice methodology that I've been involved in quite a bit is called peer observation. So at another institute where I teach called SABIT, we've got what I think is a really good culture where each year, every teacher both observes someone else teach and gets observed themselves. And we need to write up reflections about that. And it's useful both both aspects of it are useful for every teacher. So you get feedback from another teacher, which is helpful to you, but you also get to see how another teacher does things, and perhaps get exposed to different ways of teaching or different methods that you might not have thought of. And I guess I was thinking a bit about comparing that process of peer observation to what we did.
Which is a kind of self-observation, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, I've found the peer observation process has been able to give me some things that I wouldn't have got through this process. So, for example, there's been a couple of times when a teacher has watched me and just realized straight away that I was doing something in a suboptimal way. Like I could have used a particular program better, or I could have used a handheld slide changer or something like that. Things that I don't think I ever would have come across through self-reflection because I just hadn't realized that was an option. So in that sense, I think peer observation offers something unique that this process didn't. But on the other hand, as we said, a good thing about this process is that you can get feedback and learn from a whole lot of teachers at once. So I guess I think the peer observation process is probably well suited to a kind of an ongoing thing where you learn from you learn with a different teacher each year. Whereas what we did is probably more suited to a kind of a once-off thing. Like I can imagine if a bunch of people all started teaching at the same time together, what we did would be a really great way to do things, both from a kind of a team bonding perspective, but also as a way of kind of all learning from each other at the same time and kind of maximizing utility within one activity, I guess.
You make an interesting point. I'd like to hear from Josh, because you've been doing sort of self-reflective work, quite deeply in your own practice, and you might not have called it self-study, and you might not have done it collaboratively, but it has been a method for you. And is it something that you've sort of built into your way of being a teacher, I guess? Maybe we could just finish with a few thoughts from you, Josh, on that.
Yeah, I think I guess I've been thinking around the conversational nature of the methodology and what we bring to those conversations, and that we're, I guess, always having conversations with ourselves a bit. So I appreciated one of the perspectives that I think, Matt, you brought to the table was around metacognition. Am I saying that right? Being aware of one's cognitive processes, but I guess I've had a similar but different background around just noticing mood, noticing dialogue, noticing practice, and I took a while to click with the collaborative self-study. So, Dylan, you made a point about, which we all try to kind of do to a sense, to not just leap straight to the literature to answer our own research questions. But I found my own experience anyway, I had to, because I guess I felt a sense that I'm a certain level of responsibility to kind of give us a bit of a guide, be a bit of a co-guide, like a companion through the forest. And so I at one point, Nikki, I did go to a couple of studies just where in particular, I was interested in some literature where teachers in higher education had done a collaborative self-study and they were writing their insights and sharing their stories. And the one that, forgive me for not knowing the author's name offhand, but the one that really shone for me was where a teacher in higher education just did some conversational interviews with some students, and just one student just made a comment about a particular look that this lecturer would often give to students when they were trying to in class. And for this person involved in collaborative self-study around their own teaching practice didn't know what look this student was referring to. So after this interview, this lecturer called up 3 close friends and said, "Hey, this student just said I've got this look and described it this way. Do I have a look?" And these lifelong friends essentially said, yeah. And then this person, well, when I do this look, what do you, how does it make you feel? What is it like, you know, what do you think it means? And one honest friend said, well, I've come to understand what this look means, but to be honest, sometimes the look, it makes me feel like you think I'm stupid. And so then there was that cycle where this teacher was aware through conversation of this look, and they fine-tuned their practice and actually named it with new groups of students. And for me, that was, you know, that just helped me to click, if that makes sense. So I found it helpful to go, that was my experience of the methodology, and that helped us to go, I think I get now, you know, the wonderings, the conversation that we shared was around, hey, I'm wondering if, because we weren't really, like you said, Adrian, we weren't in that kind of situation where we're observing each other as teachers or practitioners in higher education. And yet we were able to, there's still a thrust, I'm wondering, and the thrust is that cycle that you outlined so well, Nikki, in that chart that you showed earlier. Anyway, I'm at the risk of not being concise anymore. I'm just sharing some thoughts. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Josh.
Sorry.
You make a really important point, which is that it is about concrete practice, whether that's our own concrete practice or the people that we're in a study group with, or indeed the practices from literature. And collaborative self-study literature is fantastic, good stories to read. So if you're looking to really for insights into what is it like to be a teacher and what is it like to be scholarly in one's approach in teaching, those papers are a wonderful resource for that. So yes, I encourage you all to keep reading in that space. And yes, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experiences around this project that we did together. I loved it. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki.
And thank you all.